All right. Hi, we've got Ken and Ray here from Paylocity. Thanks so much for kicking us off. I'm going to turn it over to you and let you start your session.
Present. Hit. Hello. So me and Ray are going to talk about how we implemented Chainguard and got it to pick up steam in our company. So first, a little bit about Paylocity. We're a SaaS provider, started in 1997. We have over 6,000 employees, 39,000 clients. We are natively remote, so there's no return to office mandates for us. Both of us have been here for 4 years, and we currently have some opening positions, including in security, if you're interested. On to the talk. So most times when you bring a new tool into a company, the first way you go about it is you kind of go through a few processes, get it adopted, and then you just kind of throw it over the fence and hope for implementation. And a lot of the times that implementation dies as soon as you start, and it usually dies once developers kind of lose focus on it. Developers have bugs, performance issues, deadlines, other priorities from their leadership that they need to do, and they usually kind of put off other things to later when they can. And as a former developer, that was always my viewpoint as well. So we took a different approach and thought, how's the best way to get developers interested and intrigued and get rid of their fears as soon as we start to introduce the product. So that was kind of our roadmap with how we brought it into the company. What are developer pushbacks? So the first one is this a standard? And we went through our paved road, which is kind of like pre-standard, bringing it to people, like getting some feedback, finding out what people's concerns are, and then introducing it to our ARB, which is our architecture review board, so that they could see and get used to this process. We were also able to gather a ton of metrics from how it was used in the industry already. So people could see that it's not just a fly-by-night, jumpstart company, and that people are really using this in production systems. The next pushback is just general usage, not just from the industry, but us. No one wants to be the first one to do something unless it's their idea usually. So what we did was, during the procurement process, which takes a little bit of time for our company, we converted 2 existing apps and came up with any gotchas and the entire timeline of how that conversion process went, good and bad, timeline, etc. We also have a couple of teams who have a slightly different development timeline than the most of our teams. So we knew they'd have a little bit of space to slide something into their current roadmap. So we asked them to do a conversion. And not only did they do the conversion, but they got it into prod before we even were finished procurement. So once procurement was done, we had live actual production systems running Chainguard. So we could use them as a milestone and example to everyone else of how easy it is to get there. The other problem is most developers, they tried to squeeze something in and they're worried about how long something's going to take. What timelines is it going to push back? What things do they have to give up to get it in? So we have something at our company for starter packages. So whenever a new feature needs done, a new work engine, etc., we have starter packages in a few different languages. We went through the process of converting those to use Chainguard so that as soon as we started the implementation, we could show and let people start using it without even doing the conversion. They were just using the Chainguard images right away. We also have something called Day of Gracious Learning. Every month, we set a specific day, and you're encouraged as an employee to go to Day of Gracious Learning. Anyone at the company can sign up to present, and anyone can sign up to view any of those presentations or do your own personal work. if you have a skunk source product, if there's something new you want to learn, if there's a different area of the company you'd like to learn, it's all open to go for any of those things. So what we did at Day of Gracious Learning was we did a live conversion of an app from someone in the group. So it wasn't like we, were able to pre-do it and then just run through it. We did a live version of a conversion with an app that we hadn't seen yet so that people could see what we run into and what we didn't run into. And from there, they could really be confident in what they were getting. And then, of course, last is communication. Once we've got rid of all of the fears that we thought developers would have, we threw all of our communications in Slack, office hours, and department meetings. But by then, pretty much everyone in the company kind of knew what we were doing, why we were doing it, and our timeline to get it done. This was more just the official announcement that it was actually live and you could really start using those processes. But because we went through all of the other things first, this was just a formality. And from there, I'm going to turn it over to Ray to finish up the presentation. Ray?
Hey, thank you, Ken. I wanted to talk to you folks about the Chainguard images POC that we did here at Paylocity when we got started with Chainguard, right? So we first got interested in Chainguard because of the potential vulnerability reduction. With the promise of 0 to low CVEs, that was really interesting to us because at the time, like most orgs right nowadays, we have a hybrid environment with a lot of workloads on-prem and pretty much the same amount in AWS, and we're more and more pushing into AWS, right? So with this push into AWS, we implemented a cloud infrastructure scanning, right? So that we can stay on top of the attack surface as we moved into AWS. And we started to see, that container vulnerabilities were starting to become a problem, right? Because early on, folks were targeting open source images to build off of, right? So our developer teams and our operations folks were leveraging that, and we could see, the vulnerabilities multiply, right? Because our open source images, right, are based off of distributions, and there's a lot of bloat that exists in those images, and as well as they're already kind of proliferated with like vulnerabilities that haven't been handled since they're open source, right? So we didn't have a good patching process in place, right? You can't really shell into a runtime container, patch it, because as soon as the application is redeployed, right, that's going to come back, is going to come right back. And we didn't have a really good base to build off of. Internally, right, we didn't have a gold image process in which we had a good place, good clean base to build off of. And so that's when Chainguard came into play, right? So they offer us the clean base with 0 to low CVEs. So that was really interesting, right? And so now we're only interested in what we're managing, right? The tools that we're adding into those images and making sure that we update those. And so, we started to look into the POC. We started to go through our GitHub organization to see what kind of image scenarios we had out there. And then, we leveraged the GitHub API so that we can get a distribution of the different image scenarios we had. And right off the bat, we started to see a pattern, right? We had a good number of base images that the developer teams were consuming. And these base images were owned and maintained by operation folks on our side. So we kind of noted that for the future. We said to ourselves, we're gonna work with these folks, right, later on once we have this POC done, so that they can migrate over to Chainguard, and then the developer teams can consume Chainguard without too much impact on their side, right? Because most of the things that needed to be handled to migrate to Chainguard were going to be handled by us and the operation teams, right? In kind of collaboration. So that was great. So we started an automated pipeline so that we can build security scan and also run automated testing on these different scenarios, right? And then create a baseline, right? So we can compare once we migrate to Chainguard to make sure that one, we're getting our return of investment, right? We get those reduced vulnerabilities, and then also prove to our operation folks and developer teams that these newly, migrated images to Chainguard are just going to be as functional as their open source counterparts, right? So we created that process, or we found all these scenarios, right? And these scenarios ranged from all the different SDKs that we see in our organization, from .NET, right, or Node for our front end, or for tooling from some of our operation folks, right? And and yeah, so we essentially we create this pipeline, and we had all this automation in place, right, so that we can now compare Chainguard once we migrated. So we did the technical migration over for all of these different scenarios, and we were able to prove, right, that we got the vulnerability reduction, right. We saw from 90 to 95%, vulnerability reduction in the Chainguard counterparts. And the good thing about going down this technical route, right, creating this automated pipeline to, show the reduction in vulnerabilities and also prove its functionality, was that we kind of encountered a lot of the gotchas that you could be worried about, when migrating to Chainguard, right? Because Chainguard does implement security best practices by default, right? And so it kind of forced us to go down the path and make sure that as we're building, we keep these best practices in mind, but we have to document those, because our development teams and our operations folks aren't really used to that, because the open source counterparts don't by default, right, implement best practices like a low privilege user, right, or excluding package managers or shells and all that stuff. So we kind of have to document, let them know, if you want to, create an image in your Docker file, if you need to install, open source package that like everybody's going to need to do, right, as part of their image, then you have to change to the root user, but make sure you exit as a low privilege user is already able. And you'll have questions like, oh, well, what is the low privilege user? Is it the same user across all the different Chainguard images? And you'll have to do some introspection for that. So we created a bunch of documentation around the gotchas that you need to do or you need to handle, and it's all technical things that we were able to piece together as we did the migration ourselves early on, right, to create this automated pipeline. And so we had a whole bunch of these gotchas, right, that we were able to show with the operations team, and we were able to partner with them and work through any of the problems that we had. And so it kind of sped up, the migration for them, and they were able to publish these now Chainguard backed base images that then were distributed across the org, because the developer teams consume them from the developer teams, and so that sped it up. And then we also shared this same documentation with our developer teams, right? So they might have one-off CI/CD processes in which they own their own base images, and they'd be interested in going down, the migration path as well. So yeah, the POC did help us a lot early on, and for our team digging into the POC and diving deep into these technical gotchas helped also in spreading the adoption of the Chainguard based images across our org. So really quickly, I think within a month or 3 months, we're already close to 20% adoption, which is pretty well, if you ask me. But yeah, that's a little bit on the Chainguard images POC. I think I'll open it up for questions now.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that's a great overview. And I think, you know, one of the things that
Hey, Mandy, you're on mute.
Keith, thanks for that too. Thanks, Ken and Ray. That was great. I know that getting development teams to adopt new tools is a real challenge that many teams face. And I love your day of gracious learning, especially the live conversion. All right, we do have time for a few questions. Here's some for the chat. What gotchas did you encounter and document?
Ray?
Oh, sorry, I was looking for the mute button. Yeah, like one of the main ones was like, you have to target a dev version of the image. So like if you have automation set up and you're building with best practices and you're deploying to a prod image, you have to target a dev image because that's going to have the shell and that's going to have the package manager. So you can actually shell into the container. And then you can do some introspection commands like a who am I command, right? You can see the low privileged user right away because that's going to be the users that gets exited. It's a best practice and it's what is expected when you're in Chainguard, but that's not really what you're going to expect in an open source image counterpart, right? You're going to more than likely be root, so that way you can have easier access to building on it. But that's not something that you'll find in Chainguard, right? Because they are implementing best practices. And so some of the things too, like you have to, keep in mind that you have a different, package manager inside of a Chainguard image. You're not going to be using like, you use apt-get instead, right? And so the package names might, they might be different, right, than what you're expecting. So a quick Google search, like what is this package name, for this package, what is the package name under this package manager, and then switch that command a little bit. And so it's fairly new. We haven't really used it as well, but the Docker file conversion tool is really cool in this space, right? You can point it at a existing Docker file and it can do most of the conversions for you. And then you can just, run testing on it and pretty much you're good to go. So a lot of the gotchas would probably be handled there. Yeah, we're looking into it more. And we're hoping to use it and hopefully it can add to our adoption, right? So.
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. Yes, our images don't have package managers or shells by default, but we have our -dev variants, the ability to add additional packages with our tooling. And as you said, our Docker file converter can help you find the packages you need and switch out your commands. Let's see, I got one more from the chat. What key metrics did you capture related to the before state and the negative implications of them? And how did this help you justify your evaluation and decision to move forward with Chainguard?
Yeah, so that's kind of like what we were targeting with the automated pipeline was actually, I didn't talk, I had plans to talk about it, but I missed it. But we used Docker Scout at the start so we can get a good view of the attack surface on our open source counterpart images and then try to create a baseline, right? But we didn't get too much. We didn't get what we expected from Docker Scout, so we actually pivoted and we used Trivy, and that gave us a pretty good view of the attack surface because it was looking at the open source, the system, the operating system, installations and their vulnerabilities, but also looking at the package managers within the container, the image itself, and also reporting on those vulnerabilities. And so that gave us a good baseline to start off from. And then that's when we started to see the 90 to 95%, vulnerability reduction. And that's one of the key things. But we also wanted to make sure that these Chainguard backed images were just as functional as our open source counterparts, since we're going to work, with our operations teams and migrate their existing base images to be backed by Chainguard. So that was really important for us too. So we had automated testing on across images. And so we did this for every single, language SDK that we had here at Paylocity. And that ranges from like .NET to Node. I think we had some Java as well. So we did some for that as well. So, but mainly for us, it was the vulnerability counts and the different levels, right?
I love how you like really spell out the challenges of migration, but also show how accessible it is. That's really helpful. I really appreciate hearing about your CI/CD setup.
Thank you.